This is my presentation on Dr. Robert Merrill. Don't tell me, show me. A closer look at his main body of work is his design on computer AI, his pedagogy, and of course, the first principle of instruction, which we as instructional designers are looking at this. His first theory or main work came out in 1977, the introducing component display theory. Then later, back in 2002, there's MPI, which is the principle of instruction, and he did a lot of early work in computer AI training. And to see this work in action, if you look to the left, you see a module that's used by a barista to learn how to do a particular drink. This is part of his component theory that he came out with, which is still used today. And on the right hand side, you see the Dragon capsule, which is what SpaceX uses to get to space. This is trained by an AI, by a person, and that's trained the AI, and the AI now turns to the machine. This AI training is taking place in using the first principle of instruction. A bio on Dr. Merrill. He is married to Catherine Merrill, and together they have 9 children and 39 grandchildren. He was a Mormon missionary. He served as a secondary teacher. That didn't last too long. With his views of teaching, and eventually got his PhD at University of Illinois. His educational tenets. Um, these things change, meaning that the way we teach does not change, but the method, the technology that we use will always change. For example, 1960, 1970, we had broadcast TV. From there, we go into multimedia. Back in 1980 2000, we have computer-based networks, which I remember using in the school systems. And then from there, we transition into what we know as the World Wide Web by 2000, 2018, the Internet of Learning Management Systems. And that's where we have Canva, and that really didn't take off into the mobile until 2007, which we know of the iPhone when the iPhone came out, and thus made mobile learning a more possible uh, applications. And then in 2018, now we have the opportunity of using AI, which is embedded into learning systems. And how does that help teachers? How does it help students? And also, too, as instructional designers, how does that help us when we're creating our content as well? Let's look at the theory. The first
Lots of details of these principles. The things that make the most difference are really simple. First of all, we need to show people what we're trying to teach them instead of just tell them. So much instruction is tell, 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 and we don't show them what to do. Second, we need to give students an opportunity to practice what they've learned, and that doesn't mean just to answer multiple choice questions, which we often refer to as ask what they've learned or remember, but it means to get them involved in classifying instances, or get them involved in actually carrying out a procedure, or getting them involved in making predictions or troubleshooting in more complex tasks. And so consequently, much of what's called practice is not practice at all. It's not really application. And finally, students, we have all kinds of talk of motivation. People have indicated that motivation is perhaps the most important thing of all. Some people have said if students are motivated, we don't have much else to do. Well, this is just plain not true. If you lead a horse to an empty well, they're still going to die of thirst if there isn't water in it. And we can motivate students to pieces, and if there isn't substance and we have violated other principles in the instruction, they're still not going to learn. In fact, we often have a false concept of what motivation is. We think motivation comes from animation and games and edutainment, when in fact these are maybe attention getting, but real motivation comes from learning. Real motivation comes when students are able to do something they weren't able to do before.
And this is where we launch into the first principle of instruction. As we take a look at this instruction manual, we'll see how this works. First, is separated into 5 different principles. And the principle means a condition of learning. or an area or a period of time that will take for a person to learn an information. The first step is problem centered learning. Learning starts with the demonstration of a real world problem or demo. For example, we're making a pizza. Show them the steps. Don't hide it. Here's a cell phone. This is also being used in different countries around the world that make the iPhone in China. They don't speak English. But how do you convince someone who doesn't have an education to make the most complicated devices in the world? By using the first principle of instruction. And thus, the principle has a correlation relationship. And thus, the relationship can also help the individual understand what's going on. Principle two, activation. Activate the learning based on the knowledge. Learn based knowledge.
Taking into consideration what the student knows or what he or she does not know. That is a big issue. This can be done by testing, pre-tests, questionnaires, and when we're in the realm of instructional design, we really don't know the topic. We're really just going with what the professor or the content knower knows, and at times we just there's no way to gauge this. Now, in a different realm, if you are the professor or you are the teacher, this is different, and you can gauge it much more readily, and you can see where that base is. Because once this is known, then you can continue on to the next steps. The next step, that's the principles. Um, a lot of times, just asking and figure where the students are at, and then see where you can correlate some information, build on what they know already.
Now we go on to the third level, which is demonstration. And the demonstration portion is when we go into the portion of what can we do, what do I know, what are the various steps and procedures, and all observing the guidelines. And then we do it together. We do it together. You see that this principle really works well when it comes to teaching in the classroom, teaching online, teaching live, teaching synchronously. And as instructional designers, sometimes we're in the pre-planning, pre-designing of this, not realizing that this is what takes place when the student and the instructor have to work with the content that we have designed or made. And then this a is the instructor experienced enough to go off and make their own examples, or do we provide examples of how this can be laid out and broken down, especially if they're doing a particular assignment in the course that we are creating? And again, motivation is not something that we add. It's more on the fact that the goal is the motivation. This is the problem centered learning. For example,
in the idea of motivating or making it appealing to people. And often what that does is increase the cognitive load to the point where it's very difficult. I saw a thing called Mathematics Under the Sea based on The Little Mermaid. And I said, I guarantee you that that is not going to be as effective as even a straightforward piece of instruction, because the kids are thinking about what her name is, Little Mermaid, and all this kind of. And I said, has nothing to do with the mathematics. This is ridiculous. And so if we're going to make things, appealing to people, if we're going to, people, learning is the key to motivation. It's also the key to retention. Uh, if I gain a skill and I can do something, that becomes a problems in my course. Then if those problems are personal, or if they're in the experience, they're much more likely to learn them. If they're very abstract, I'm going to teach you how to do a balance sheet on a spreadsheet, and I don't have any reason to use that, or no problem to solve for it, or nothing in my experience about it. The best I'm going to do is memorize a bit to pass the test, and I'm done. So, that's the other issue is how do I now if I
he reminds us that motivation is based on the goal, not on what we give them. And sometimes as teachers, we tend to put a lot of different things in the activity, but a lot of times that gobbledygooks the actual lesson. So if we focus on the goal at hand, you can do many goals, but in the end, the goal at hand is the main reason why that student is learning.
I'm getting older.
Now we go into the principle of application. In this realm, principle of application, the learner must apply new information on their own and learn from their mistakes. So many times we don't allow students to fail. Failure is bad. Actually, failure is very good. We learn the best from our failures. And then if they do, provide reasons why they failed. Provide clear expectations, step-by-step instructions, um, scaffolding as much as possible, so that they realize the failure is not something that they need to give up, but more is something that they have to readdress, to figure out, to see what they went wrong, what they went wrong in the process. And here's one thing which is not often talked about in education, which is troubleshooting.
One of the skills that I put up there a minute ago was comprehend process skill. And a process basically is a set of conditions that lead to some consequence, to lead to some solution or something. And one of the kinds of skills that we do's that we don't often use in instruction is troubleshooting. Now, in technical world, people are very familiar with troubleshooting, but you can troubleshoot anything if you understand what the conditions are. And let me use an example of selling furniture. That's the example I use in my book. All right, and so the course that I looked at, they had all these steps for how to successfully sell furniture. And I looked at it and I said, yeah, but you haven't emphasized the important part of this. It isn't the steps you take, it's how the customer responds to each of those steps. And so if you look down and watch the customer, I don't care how you get there, I watch the customer. If they don't do this, this, and this, they're not going to buy. And so the whole idea of troubleshooting is if I get a, we all get outcomes that don't work. Well, then the question is, what were the conditions that led to that outcome? And let's work backwards. And which of those conditions were faulted or missing or corrupt in some way? Or did I even remember do I even identify correctly what the conditions are that led to the consequence that I want?
The last step is, of course, the opportunity to integrate the knowledge that they gain into the actual world. If you look at the model and look at what they did, is it exactly the same? Well, hopefully not. It should be some differences in variation. And this is where we go into the area of reflection. Do we take time to reflect on what's learned? Discussion, reflection, and observe the creation. Be proud of what was done in the process of making this. Now, there are some issues with implementing this model. The issue with the model that instructors need to keep in mind is that the material that I want to instruct may be too difficult, which causes my audience not to pay attention. As you see in the picture right there, it's just way too difficult. The model that the instructors need to keep in mind is that the material might be way too difficult for the students, and thus they shut down. Doesn't matter how much we scaffold, how much we break it down, it's just way too hard. And that's something that we just, as teachers and instructional designers, we realize that this is just may not be appropriate, and we can tell that to the faculty member. You may, even though they know you're not experiencing that profession, but they are the content. But at times that they may not work, and this is something that you might bring to your supervisors as well. Um, I don't know what happened. When the issue with the model that instructor needs to keep in mind is that balance, performing, problem, and difficulty. Is there a balance with everything taking place? Can it be saved? Can it be scaffolded? Can it be taught well? Now, me and the new challenge of can the first principle be used for teaching AI and machine learning? The answer is yes. And as we mentioned about the Dragon space castle, it has been used. Using Merrill's first principles with AI, as you see, can be done and are being done effectively well. Um, for example, in this case, application provides the on-hand project with the learner, which is the machine, and thus giving the machine the opportunity to see what the finished product would look like, then giving it reasons to how to break it down, how to understand it, and then it trains it. In this model, you see with thinkable machines at Google, you see the AI learning the visual prompt, then seeing the second visual prompt. Then the train takes place, which is the magic sauce. We're not really doing that much involvement in this point, but then it generates the actual the application that you want. This is still taking part of the Merrill's first principle when you being used. And here's a little fast forward way of it being used in with AI software applications. So this application is still very useful, not just in with humans, but also with computer science learning machine thinking. I hope you enjoyed our explanations of Dr. Morell's principle. And here are the work sites of any information that you'd like to get on your hands on. Thank you so much.